Greetings, aspirants. Today, let's talk about another concept from the subject Environment and Ecology, that is invasive alien species. So, what are these invasive alien species? These species that can be plants or animals and pathogens such as bacteria or fungi or any other species that are non-native to the ecosystem. That means they're introduced into an ecosystem and they do not belong there. So these kind of invasive alien species may affect the economic or environment and also might adversely affect the human health. And they might, for their survival, may compete with the native species, which might decline the opportunities for the native species in the terms of nutrition, and hence these native species might go extinct. So through competition, they might eliminate the native species, or by predation, they might be predating on the native species, or by transmission of pathogens. Now, this might disrupt the local ecosystems and ecosystem functions. Now let's understand what do we mean by transmission of pathogens by this example of rats. This commonly found rats are frequently identified with the decline of many birds on islands, and they might be transmitting pathogen like the plague bacteria via fleas. These rats might be having fleas on their body which are introduced into a new ecosystem, and hence they might be transmitting the plague bacterium to different kinds of ecosystems. And also, these invasive species can be compounded by climate change. Now, how does this happen? During climate change, we can see that the number of catastrophes like floods or hurricanes are increasing day by day. Now, during this, these invasive species like plants or aquatic, some other aquatic animals might get transported from one ecosystem to another, and they can be introduced to a new ecosystem where they can be invasive in nature. And these invasive species have the ability to expand rapidly and also grow in higher latitudes as well as higher altitudes where the climates are warm, and they outpace the native species as we have seen through the process of competition, predation, and transmission of pathogens. So let's see the example of water hyacinth, that is also known as terror of Bengal. Now these species are on ornative plants. You can see that these flowers are very ornamental and aesthetic in view. And so during colonial times, the Britishers have introduced these, which are actually native to South America. They have been introduced in their colonies, like in India and also in Eastern Africa. And these species are invasive in nature. Now, the pollutants from man's activities, like the effluent, when released into such ponds, might provide them with more nutrients to grow, and hence they outgrow in number. Now we need to understand that when a species is introduced to a new ecosystem, they do not come along with their predators, so there is nothing to balance their population, and hence they grow in large numbers because there is no predator or any other pathogen that might be disrupting the population of them or controlling the population of them. So we can understand that they might get double in as short span as 12 days, and hence blocking the waterways, limiting the boat traffic in the waterways, and also affecting fishing and trade. When you can see when there is growth like this on lake or aquatic ecosystem, we understand that it reduces the dissolved oxygen for the other aquatic animals that are living in the same ecosystem. And it also blocks the sunlight. And hence, Blocking of sunlight means stopping the photosynthesis of the algae that might be present in the interiors of the water body like lakes or ponds. And hence it disrupts the whole ecosystem. So same thing happened in Lake Victoria in Eastern Africa, and they grew in such densities that the boats or the ships are unable to leave the docks. They are not even able to move, and such is the density and the growth in Eastern Africa. Now, what are the effects of it? We have to understand here that the biological invasions are a major threat to global food security and livelihood in developing nations, especially because if a pathogen like a fungus is introduced, that might be feeding on or pesting on rice crops or wheat crops. What will be the ill effects of it? It would cause a major threat to the food security. That means, so we need to understand that these invasive species can pose a major threat to food as well as to livelihoods of the farmers is also affected, and the trade of the imports and exports of food grains also might get affected, and the trade gets affected. So, and in developing countries, it becomes much more threat. It poses much more threat because they are not ready or they cannot spend so much money in controlling such invasive species, understanding them, to develop what are the mitigation strategies, and all this might take time and money. So it poses greater threat to developing countries. And these invasive species reduces the resilience of the habitats because they reduce the biodiversity, the richness of the biodiversity. So because the native species are getting extinct and these invasive species are growing in number, you might find that the species that are responsible for controlling some kind of activity or some kind of natural disaster might get affected and they might go extinct. And hence, the resilience to such climate change or such disasters might reduce because of the growth of these invasive species in the natural habitats. So today we have understood what are invasive alien species and examples and how are they affecting the world ecosystems and what are the threats they pose to native ecosystems. Thank you.